we are hopefully Robert Weatherwax will be here soon. We are talking to somebody that he knows very well, or worked with actually. So I've called that very well, and by reputation. And that is a guy who was not just an animal trainer, not just a dog trainer, but a stuntman and an actor. Probably was an electrician. Who knows? He probably did magic tricks on the side. He's multi-talented, as they say in the business. He worked a lot, did a lot of things, and he's really one of the greats in the. If you look at the animal trainers and from the era of good trainers, because I think we've had a drop. And Robert Weatherwax thinks we've had a drop in the trainers.
A drought.
We've had a drop. We've had a drop. The skill level has dropped, is what he would say. Of course, Bryan knows. Well, he knew my mentor and my other mentor. Of course, the guy who was the most influential for the movie stuff was Carl Miller for me, and Bryan knew Carl Miller. And I just got to say, I got to give Bryan some information because he doesn't know some stuff about me. So when I was about 17 and a half, Carl offered me an apprenticeship, but I was too young and lived too far away and was too naive to go for that. And if I had, which I very upset about, I would have obviously. Rudd Weatherwax was still alive then. Got influenced by him and Frank, because I think Carl Miller met Frank Weatherwax first, but also of course Frank Inn, and I know you have a big connection with Frank Inn, who legendary animal trainer, of course Benji originally. And also Arnold the Pig on Green Acres, a lot of work. Petticoat Junction, the Beverly Hillbillies, all of that stuff he was involved with. And Bryan also worked with other people who were working with Doctari, and after that happened, and because that's there's a big animal time. And we don't have that anymore. Although Bryan has done a lot of things, he's also a Vietnam Army veteran. So there's a little bit that he's got some things that other people don't have to talk about that you won't find with a normal dog with a normal dog trainer. When you face getting shot, it changes your whole life. Let me tell you. So or blown up or punchy sticked or whatever, it changes your life quite a bit. So let me. There's so many ways I don't even know how to start. But Bryan, let me ask you. Who was your most influential mentor, or for you, as far as animal training or dog training?
Well, I guess I would have to say my uncle. Hey, Robert, what's up?
How's it going?
I would have to say Ray Berwick, my uncle, but I was when I started working in the business, I took pretty much lessons from everybody. I watched all the trainers. From Carl to Frank, and I would take what I felt was the best of that. That's what I would consume in my training ability. And I was fortunate because the older group of trainers, which were more heavy-handed than they are now. And Ray was very, very, very much into positive reinforcement, which you have to be when you're working, especially a bird. And so I got to learn a lot of yeah you'll get bit. So I would just take little pieces from everybody that I worked with, and if I didn't like something, then I would go, okay, I'm not doing that. But if I really like something, I remember I had a TV series in the 80s called Here's Boomer. We brought Clint Rao out, and we did a little thing where the dog had to walk away from camera and fall over dead. And so I was like, well, how's he going to do that? So he just had the dog walk straight away from camera and lie on his side without looking back or anything, and pretending to be dead. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's really cool to work with a dog. So I started doing that with my dog at Universal. We called it a workaway, where the dog looks at directly in front of you, doesn't look at you, but you're behind the dog. And I trained my dog to do every single thing from behind. I thought it was so cool. So that was something that I grabbed right away from Clint Rowe. I stole it from you, buddy. Sorry.
Can you tell me about that? Or Robert, again, Robert may already know because, Weatherwax, they know a lot of stuff. So yeah. Anyway, tell the audience about the time that Carl Miller had to do the dog run up a hill looking backwards.
Well, this is something that Carl told.
Okay.
We were working. He had brought his dog out on a TV show that I was doing, and it was on the Rin 1010 show. Now, whether it was the director wanted the dog to run straight up a hill away from him, look back and bark, and Carl was like, how do I do that? And the director who had worked with the dog, and it was one of those really good trainers that did the Rin 1010 stuff, he says, why don't you just tell him what to do? And he did, and he said it worked. So I was always blown away by that because I thought, well, that's a pretty cool behavior to teach your dog to run away from you and look back and bark, but keep running the other direction. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. The general audience, I mean, the pet dog trainers and the sport dog trainers, they don't realize how difficult movie TV training is because they haven't had to do this, and they don't realize they're always working with the dog close, usually very close to them, most all of the time from the side or they're in front of the dog. And one of the things Robert and I have talked about before is we're working from behind the dog. Most of the time, so are military and tactical dog trainers. Same thing. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that most people are not used to that. Difference with the movie and TV thing is they're not with the trainer. They're with an actor that they may not have met or not known or somebody. And a lot of times, as you know, Bryan, very well, some of the actors don't like working with animals, which I don't understand why they're in the picture if they don't, especially if it's a primary, if the animal's a primary. Now for people who don't know, because it's hard for me because I know some things about Bryan and I cannot assume that the audience will know them. But if you watch Beretta, one of the reasons why Beretta became back in the 70s became so popular is because he had a cockatoo, a white cockatoo. Fred, I think, was the name of the bird, trained by Bryan.
Ray Berwick trained the original Fred. I always like to give credit to where credit's due. I wouldn't take. I trained two different birds that we did a lot of flying stuff with, but Ray had initially trained that cockatoo. That cockatoo was in the show at Universal Studios in the tour center when I started. So he was already doing a routine. The only issue with that cockatoo, and I was I was the only person that worked him besides Ray Berwick because he would eat you. And he would do it during the show if he wanted to. But I never let him bulldog. As a matter of fact, he chased Robert Blake out of a dressing room once.
That's cool. I mean, I'm all down for that. Now, to bring in the last of the legendary Lassie traders, Robert Weatherwax. I mean, a lot of this stuff it seems redundant to you guys, but just because the audience doesn't know, this is what I want to expose the fact that movie dog trainers and TV dog trainers have been doing stuff for 100 years that other people don't know, and some of the people, we discovered clickers. Yeah, well, circus dog trainers were doing that. If you go back to the silent dog period, people were also doing things like that. And they started working with mirrors originally. So not to get, because the dog's looking at the handler and they're looking for directions, right? Robert and I have talked about this. So sometimes the handler trainer has to hide, like in Wizard of the Oz, he was talking about his uncle hiding in one of the trees, for example. Robert was hiding in the bushes in Beethoven. And but they used mirrors. So the dog would not look at them. The dog would look at the mirror and see the trainer doing hand signals.
I never knew that. That's funny. I never knew that.
You didn't know that? Oh, no. Yeah. It was a big problem. Like when,
I wish I'd have known that. Might have saved me some problems.
Lee Duncan, the original Rin Tin Tin trainer, who was an incredible my idol. That's what he said. That's what he said. We had to learn how to start using mirrors and start doing things. But anyway, let Robert jump on in here and probe Bryan. Give Bryan a probe.
Hey, how you doing, Bryan?
Good. I haven't seen you since Mouth of Madness.
Yeah, in Toronto.
To do that.
Yeah, that was what, about 90, 94 or something like that?
Probably.
Yeah, only 30 years ago, just like yesterday, right?
Yeah, that was back when I had hair.
Yeah. We could do a lot of back then that we can't do today. But you were talking a lot about that. Where Carl had the dog going up the hill and looking back and barking. I mean, we did that a lot on Lassie, but I think a lot of that was really just about having really strong stay from a distance. I mean, there's a lot of trainers, and Christophe and I have talked about it, who can't get their dog to stop, to come in 100 feet and then stop at 50 feet and do something, right? And then continue out of the shot because they're working so close to the dog to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So I know that a lot of the things that happened on Lassie, similar shots to what you're describing with Carl. It was more about the coordination between the trainer. It was about, one person sending the dog and then the other receiving person putting a stay and then getting a speak back from the other trainer. A lot of it's coordination, and it's hard to do a lot of the shots. People think, oh God, you needed like 3 trainers on this movie or this TV show or whatever. And it's like, yeah, because, if they're shooting stuff in masters, which they used to do a lot of, there's no place to be. And now I see with dog movies, there's a lot more cutting, a lot more, the way that they're working around doing the master, like in Lassie Come Home, where he has to escape the kennel without a cut. You just don't see that anymore. It's unheard of because most trainers never get their dog more than 50 feet away from them, ever. Now, Bryan and I have a little history because my grandfather, after he worked for Henry East on our gang comedy, speaking of Robert Blake, right, who actually was on the show as a young boy, and but Rennie actually was my grandfather's boss at one time. And then he went in the business for himself and actually stole the services of Frank Inn away from Rennie way back, in the 40s, early 40s. So we have quite a link, Bryan and I, when it comes to our families and the history. And it's not even just about Bryan and I working together. It's our families have been linked in motion picture dog training going back an entire century.
Well, it was a small world back then.
Absolutely.
And it certainly isn't anymore. And I don't even try. And I get things on Facebook from trainer this person, trainer that person, trainer that. Everybody's a trainer now.
Right.
And in this course that Joel and I do, as far as teaching for dog training for film, a lot of these people come on and they have trained dogs, but like you were saying, they're relatively close, and they don't know how to put distance on the dog. And that is, when you're talking film, I mean, you can't just work them vertically one way. They have to work horizontally, and free, and they have to be looking at the subject matter, whether it's the actor or whatever action is going on. There's a lot to it that a lot of people, they go, oh, well, my dog sits and lies down and he backs up. He could do, well, okay, you go ahead, because you have no idea. I mean, a director is given a script full of words, and a director, he goes, okay, I'm going to interpret these words on film the way I feel it. So when you get to the set, you may read what the script says, what the dog says or has to do, but you still don't know what the director is going to throw at you. So you have to be prepared. And I do that specifically by when I train a dog, like I've got a 1.5-year-old Border Collie now, and I'm hoping to start showing him maybe in maybe 6 months from now. And he does just about everything that I teach, but I want him really good. I won't show a dog now, and I wouldn't show a dog without all the stuff on him. I just teach him every single thing I know and that I can remember how to teach.
Yeah, well, obviously, as working as a supplier, you might have 15 to 20 dogs, and it's hard to get every dog trained to that level, right? So you have to kind of pick and choose which dogs have the greatest potential to where it's going to be the greatest investment teaching that dog all those things. I totally agree with you. I mean, if you're going to train a dog, you might as well train them to the best of your ability. And I know you have a lot of ability, Bryan. So yeah, and I've admired you long before I ever worked with you back in the 90s. And you approach things the same way my dad did. My dad always said the dog that has the training gets the job. Carl used to say the dog that gets the job gets the training. Yep. Well, I thought, Carl was good at winging it. He was used to taking untrained dogs, using tie downs and whatever. Carl made it work. My dad was a perfectionist in his preparation, and I think you are pretty much the same way. And I feel like the more things if the script calls for 5 behaviors, teach 10. If it calls for 10, teach 20, because you never know what they're going to throw at you, right?
Well, that's just it. And I tell the class when I'm teaching, it's like the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the better the outcome when you're on a film set. So teach everything, try everything. Well, here's an example. I got a call to work when I was still working in LA, a Rottweiler that I think it might have been, I forget whose it was. It wasn't my dog, but I was given it, and I worked the dog for, I don't know, about a week or whatever. And all it had to do was hold a tape, the old tape recorder, the VCR tape recorder. And so, well, that's not a big deal. He had a good retrieve and all that. So I get down there, and the location is downtown LA by the railroad tracks. The dog has to be standing there when the train pulls in. And he either takes the VCR, the tape, or gives it to him. I forget what it was. They left out that little part about a train pulling in. Fortunately, the dog didn't freak, and it worked. But I mean, you can imagine a dog that is not used to that, bye-bye.
Well, a lot of that obviously is the dog, but a lot of that is the exposure. I talk about that a lot in my book about what dogs are exposed to. And if you're keeping your dog, you're training your dog in the quiet confines of PetSmart, you're not going to get all that exposure to the things that you need when you work on a movie set. So, my dad used to say, hey, Robbie, take this dog down to the supermarket and feed him his dinner by the bus stop. And just crazy things that my dad would have me do. And I thought, okay, he'd give me $10 or whatever. And I'd take a dog down there, spend an hour, feed them their meal, stand by the automatic door when people are coming out of Vaughn's or whatever, and take them to parks and take them to construction sites, teach them to swim in a river or pond, anywhere. But that was kind of my thing growing up, is I did a lot of those things to get the dogs exposed so that my dad could train them long before I ever made $1.
Talking about having the behaviors ready and stuff. Tell everybody about the Top Dog when you had to have Betty. They changed the script on you or whatever when the.
Oh yeah, they've done that before. We had a shot in Top Dog, and Boone had Digby kind of became the lead dog, even though Betty was the one who was cast for the film, because he was more athletic, so he did a lot of the athletic stuff. But there was a scene in the house where the dog had to crawl under burning boards with a notebook in his mouth that he was trying to keep away from the bad guys. And Boone didn't have a retrieve when he did the movie, when he never taught Digby a retrieve. So, he's like frantically calling me on the walkie-talkie, Rob, get over here quick. And so I come over and he's like, does Betty know a retrieve? I'm like, yeah. But I exposed the heck out of her, This dog had been around everything. The only thing is I just had to kind of introduce her to the fire, within 5 or 10 minutes, using flame retardant on the dog and stuff. And it was, it's just, they whip it in you, just like that. I mean, we had a scene going through a doggy door in Dennis the Menace, which you wouldn't think, it's a big deal getting a dog through a doggy door. But if they haven't been through a doggy door, they're going to be like, what the hell is this thing, right? There's a hole in the wall and I ain't going through it, right?
Yeah.
But they'll say, hey, could you get it by lunch? But what about me? I'm not allowed to eat? I got to be training dogs for the next shot during lunch? because they just decided, oh, this would be great. You know, it's almost like a genie's lamp. They just rub the lamp and the dog does that. But that's because we had some great trainers who were prepared for anything, right?
Well, you're talking about working through lunch. I got to tell you a story because I teach this in the course. Hey, you got to read the script. You really got to know the script. I used to hate to read scripts. And when I was doing this Boomer series, I had everything on this dog. I never worried about it because I trained him to do pretty much everything. And there was a scene where the dog has to, the dog walks in to a lady and in his mouth is his collar, and he gives it to the lady. And the first AD says, okay, that's lunch, 1 hour. When we come back, we're going to shoot an insert of Boomer taking his collar off. And I went, okay. I didn't teach him that. I didn't read the script. So That's what I did for lunch, which is teach him, and I've done that more than once. So I was really bad at that. I hated reading scripts. I figured I'd watch the movie and see what it was like at the end, but I was working on it, so I couldn't do that.
Right. Yeah, just like an actor, it helps to know, even if the dog's not in a scene, just to know the context of the story, what the dog's been through, so that you know what kind of emotion the dog should be portraying in that particular scene. Even if it's just one scene or two scenes, the context of the movie means a lot when it comes to movie training, whereas, doing obedience training or in-home behavioral training, the dogs don't have to really be exposed to the things other than what the owner is going to expose them to in their regular everyday activities. If they take them to a park or they ride them in the car, I want them to be good on all those things. Just like
you just touched on something that I think is really important that a lot of people don't know. And say the calls for a dog to walk in. Say somebody's sitting on the couch, and the dog walks in and comes to the dog and puts his head on the lap or the knee or whatever. And so you have to know, okay, did this person that the dog is going to, did he just win the lottery and he's really happy? Or did his best friend just die and he's got to be sad? Well, you don't want the dog running in, whoopee, and the guy's best friend just died. So you really have to know this. Okay, easy, get it, put your head down. But a lot of people don't think about that. Dog comes in and puts his head, and the director goes wild and says, whoa, this dog, he's got to be sad,
Right, exactly.
Hey,
yeah, so that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Hey, something I think that the audience would be interested in hearing, and also just because, again, you guys, insiders, you already know everything, so it's hard to babble about kindergarten stuff, but what would you consider, because you've talked about behaviors, Frank Ian used to say that too, like this dog's got so many tricks on him or whatever. What would you consider the minimum that you have to have? What are the behavior, what are the things that the dog has to do? Bryan, what would you consider that, like you're saying, you're getting your dog ready? What are the different things that the dog can do that you would say has to be done to be a movie dog or a TV dog?
A stay.
Okay.
Stay. Period. Just stay there. And I have seen so many dogs who can't do that.
Especially with stuff going on.
Yeah.
A good stay. There's a lot of people use marks and a lot of people do different things. I'm one of those old-fashioned people that I like to train to stay. When I say stay, it means stay. That's all there is to it.
Robert and I have talked about some things before, so it's kind of it's weird because we have to you have to go through and approach this as if nobody knows anything here that's watching. And one of the things I've done, I don't know if you've seen it, but I've done a quarter-mile sit, stay, and recall. The dog, the videos are up with that, and so that dog can do more than a quarter mile. But yeah, that's obviously sitting and staying for quite a while. But
not so much sitting though. I don't like an automatic sit.
No, we all hate that. You're saying the same thing that we all hate.
When I say stay, it doesn't mean sit. It means stay.
No.
If the dog is sitting and I say stay,
Yeah, that's
he
what I
needs to
do.
sit and stay.
Yeah.
If he's on his side or standing or sitting up or whatever, stay means stay. That's all there is.
Stay is the period to every sentence. It's come, stay. It's sit, stay. It's lie down, stay. It's head down, stay. It's the punctuation on every sentence.
Yeah. And of course, if you're saying, okay, what do you really need to work on a set? Well, I mean, there's sit, lie down on your side. You don't very seldom do you really need to sit up or cover your eyes or a wave. You don't use that very often, but the other stuff, the basic stuff, like get in there or back up.
Retrieve is a big one.
Yeah, retrieve. And people go, well, when do you start? Because I like to start training if I have the opportunity at 8 weeks, and it's just all play. And people say, well, when do you start teaching your dog to retrieve? And I say, right away. I mean, if anything, a puppy wants to pick up everything. So, here, pick it up, hold it, good boy, and I'm never one of those. I'm not a trainer that rushes. I don't have to have everything trained tomorrow. I like to take my time and make it solid. And that's always been my kind of thing. Don't go too fast and skip things. Make it solid. So when you get on a set, you don't have to fight any of these problems. And that happens a lot.
Now, one of the things that Robert and I talk about quite a bit, and this is one of the big differences. Tactical trainers are the same way. But the sit, why my dog is sitting, is because he can see better than if he were lying down or whatever. So that's the reason for at the quarter mile, so he can see better. But anyway, the thing that tactical trainers and movie trainers have in common, we don't care about the position. We care about the location. When you're saying stay, I don't use that term for the command or whatever signal. I don't use that, but it means remain there. If you're standing, remain there. If you're down, remain there. It doesn't matter. And if you're using marks, as Robert and I talk about, we do that quite a bit. That means that mark area, just remain in that mark area. We're not obedience. Sport dog trainers where it's got to be a sit, it's got to be, we don't care. And tactically, we don't care either. If the dog is tired, he started out standing up, but he wants to lie down, I don't care as long as he doesn't leave that area. He doesn't go off into the minefield, for example, whatever.
That could be detrimental.
Yeah. But I mean, that's something I think what's good is people watching can see that it's not something I made up and said or Robert made up and said, because we got Bryan on here. We are echoing the same things. We're saying we don't care about the position. We're saying that. We're also saying that how high the distractions are. Bryan, let's talk about caterers and stuff on the set, and Robert too. I mean, people don't understand. They want to talk about training their dog to be distraction proof. Is there anything more distracting than a set with gaffers and audio and light people and the gophers and the ADs and then the caterers show up? I mean, is there anything?
No, I mean, and like we were saying before, you have to take your dog everywhere to get him used to everything. Take him to a construction site, take him to the market, so they're used to everything. Here's something a lot of people don't understand. I watch a lot of the tactical work, and I think it's fantastic what they do. It does not pertain to Robert and my world at all. A dog, we do not want a dog that looks like a robot where bam, 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 bam. A dog has, in film, more often than not, a dog has to look like a normal, everyday dog. Just walking around and doing whatever it does. So that is a big difference. And
yeah, but that's the sport. That's not real tactical dogs.
But the only thing I'm saying is in our world, we don't want that. We want very natural dog work.
Right. A lot of times that involves the speed changing, We're talking, when you're talking about agility and things like this, we're talking about, a constant speed. But movie training involves changing speeds on the dogs, changing emotion on the dog. So, you have to be able to put on the brake and the gas almost simultaneously.
Here's an example. When I was doing Benji the Hunted, there's a scene where Benji is on a rock, or no, I'm sorry, a cougar is on a rock, and Benji has just woken up, and he's watching this cougar, and he's kind of Benji's really happy about kind of seeing this cougar, and then a shot rings out, and the cougar falls off the rock and dies. Well, Joe Camp, the director and creator, and of Benji, he said, "Okay, I want to see Benji act. I want to see Benji really happy and everything, and then I want to see his face change to seeing something really bad." And you're like, "Okay, I can do that." Good, no, and boom, brought it right down. So there's a lot of things in the film business that are for dogs that are small, and people don't realize that. But you have to know how to get that emotion. For us, for Robert and I, working a dog in emotions, that's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah. Well, and okay, back. Not to forget this, Robert. What would you consider the basics that a dog has to have to approach a movie or TV?
Well, obviously stay, but thinking out a little ways. I like to think of, scenarios based on the story, but in general, I would say stay from a distance, come from a distance, being able to come easy, being able to retrieve, being able to do a go with. That's really important because, if you have a good go with, you can be really far away from the dog and still have them interact with the actor. And of course, a lot of times when we do go with, we're wanting the dog to look at the actor. So all the pay comes through the actor. People ask me what's a go with. I'm like, well, just a heel on somebody else, right? So, and of course, feet up is very important because, the more things that a dog puts their feet up on, the better confidence they'll get. Speak is absolutely paramount for any lead dog. Maybe backup dogs may not need to speak. If it's a lead dog, at some point they're going to be asked to speak because that's how dogs communicate. I guess you could throw in some other things, lie down. I don't think about sit because to me, sit is just a segue to lie down. I like to keep all my commands separate so it doesn't become a sit, lie down, right? I want everything to be distinct. So that, and I also want to back up and I want it on your feet. Those are, I'm really taking it above and beyond what most people are thinking about is the basic stuff. But anything that can get a dog where you can reposition a dog from a distance, I want that dog to know that.
Yeah. And that's really important to, like I said earlier on, teaching your dog to not only work vertical, but horizontally. So you can teach him to go over there, go out there. They need to learn. There's a lot of times when and especially if you don't have a second trainer. I love second trainers, but if you don't have one, you don't have one. Then when your dog has to come in from another room or something, okay. So you teach your dog. What I will do is I'll put them in a crate with the door open, stay there, so I don't have to worry about a sandbag falling on them or something. And then bring them in at whatever the appropriate time. And you can do the opposite. You can send them to the crate, but they need to know a lot of stuff like that. Where it's just go here, go there, and then there's times where it's like, okay, I want you to go there, but I want you to go there really fast. Oh no, I want you to go there, but I want you to mope on the way out. So I'm going to give you a real easy to go out there. I really, you just, unless you have, like you do, you have a whole lot of dogs. I'm fortunate. I have one dog, so I just teach them everything I can remember anyway. I'm sure there's a lot of things I forgot.
Right.
Well, I would also probably say, if you're talking about the lead dog, right, I think you gotta have the famous things that Rin Tin Tin and also Pal, the original Lassie, were famous for, and that's crawling and then also lying on the side and looking exhausted. The river scene when the original Pal Lassie crosses the river and comes up the hill slowly and doesn't shake off, completely. That is brilliant. So that's what the things that you guys have said. I would just add the crawling and the ability, and limping at some point because Lassie had limp, Brinton had.
It also depends a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying a lot of it, I think, depends on the type of movie it is, too. If it's a serious movie as opposed to a comedy, I think you have to be open to a lot of more tricks when you're working in a comedy than when you're working, a drama.
Yeah, that is very true. And I used to train, a dog limping, and I would do that in a live show. And if you don't take control of it, the dog's going to go boing, 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 boing. So you get, in a live show, it's like, well, you're the happiest wounded dog I've ever seen. You can do that. But when you get to film and the dog really wants him to limp, a lot of times you can kind of gimmick that.
But it's not
down with something on the foot. So it's like they're trying to use it, but they don't like that feeling. It doesn't hurt them, but they don't like that feeling. So they act like it's really hurting, and that looks real. If you teach a dog to put their foot up and move like that, if you don't have real good control on them and a really good easy on them, then it's just going to look comical. Same thing. Remember the snarlers we used to use back in the 70s?
Yeah, the snarling device.
Yeah. And they look like they're smiling.
Yeah. But you always see that if the dog has to run, because I think Christophe and I talked about this at some point, where it's really tough to get movement with a snarl, right? So I noticed a lot of times they used it when the dog was walking forward or he was running. Yeah, it looked ridiculous because it made everything pushed up.
Yeah, a lot of times when I had to do, I would teach him to bark with it. So it wasn't a frozen, because that's what looks so comical, It looked really stupid. It looked like a cartoon dog with a big smile on his face. So if you could get him to do some mouth movement, then it's not as bad. But I think they got rid of that snarler thing. We were talking about the Doberman gang. I think they use that on that.
Yeah, with groups of dogs, I could see how that would be effective because it's hard to cue 5 dogs to simultaneously snarl.
Yeah, and you can get into trouble. I mean, certain dogs that I want to teach them to snarl because I want that. Well, be very careful of where that snarl comes from. Is it coming from a happy place or is it coming from something else? You got to be really, really careful about it. So I don't mess with that at all. I've never really had much of a call for that because I've never really had like a Doberman gang show or so. Everything I've done has been all character kind of stuff. And
most of the snarls that I've done in the film industry are mostly stationary snarls where somebody comes up and a dog rises up and snarls or something like that. I haven't done a lot of snarling where the dog was actually moving. I've done slow walks with a snarl, but I've never done a full-out run. And I've seen some of these videos that look so weird. I'm trying to think of the movie. I don't think they used it in Cujo, but it was some movie where the dog was running with a snarling device in their mouth, and it looked so weird because, like you say, it looked like a smile, but it was probably just a bizarre-looking smile, right?
Well, I don't see how a director could watch that and go, "Oh, okay, that's a cut. Moving on." No, that was really stupid.
Yeah, well, that's something that Robert we've talked about before, and that's the fact that, like, for example, Carl Miller was known as the action dog guy because all this stuff we're talking about with and that's what attracted me originally. We talked about this. He Run Joe Run, for example, and then other stuff. Because he was a Doberman guy at one point, and then Alvin Mears, I guess, got.
Carl did a lot of gimmickry. I mean, he was a great trainer, don't get me wrong, but Carl was really the master of gimmickry when it came to working with dogs. He'd make it work one way or the other, right?
Well, I remember Frank Inn getting a dog to look. I don't know what dog it was, but behind his back, he'd be holding a chicken and a snake. And you want a really good look? You've never seen a chicken before or a snake? I mean, you get this really good look. It doesn't last, you know, and they'll get used to it. But, you know, I learned so on that Benji movie. At first I was like, oh my gosh, how do you know, like he would, the director, Joe Camp would say, okay, I want the dog walking away, stop, look back. I don't want him to turn, just look back. And I want another number 3 bark. And he had a bark from 1 to 10. And I'm going, as they're rolling, I'm trying to think, how the hell do I get him to a number 3 bark? What the hell is that? You know, but I learned. I mean, it was earn while you learn time on Benji the Hunted.
Yeah, that was incredible work with Benji, because I know that dog was pretty soft. And I admire the fact that you were able to do so much with a dog that probably wasn't of the caliber that Higgins was.
Well, that was all Frank in. He was, to me, one of the greatest of all time film animal trainers, not just dogs, but everything. Here's the story. Frank, you know, when we were doing Benji the Hunted, he couldn't do a lot of physical stuff because of his age and his weight. That's why he hired me to work on. And we were talking one day, and he said, I got a call one night, and the call was for a cat to walk into a kitchen and stop in the middle of the floor. And he said, this is at night. None of our cats were, you know, at a working weight. So what he did was he took a sheet of newspaper and did sanctuary training. In other words, get on the paper, stay there. Everything is fine. If you get off the paper, you get hassled until you get back on it. And that's sanctuary training. And he said by the time he got to the set the next morning, he had it down to a little piece of tape that you couldn't even see. But he put that on the floor and he sent the cat right in there. And when I heard that, I stored that right back in my memory. Okay, this is cool. I like that.
I never learned to mark from my dad. My dad never used marks. I learned marks from people like Gary Giroux and Carl Miller, and it became like something that we always did, especially when we're sending dogs away to a place when we couldn't put a trainer there. So my dad absolutely refused to use marks, but I found that there were so many things I learned from other trainers that my dad didn't do. And I think it made it easier. I'm not saying my dad couldn't get it done the way he did it, but I think that there were times when he could have done it easier. But my dad was very much about the training. He didn't want anything gimmicked. Like, for example, nudging. You know, a lot of trainers would put like a piece of food under a bowl, and then the dog would nudge it to get the food, right? Maybe put it on a curb or something. My dad, he taught it on a ramp with a cardboard box, and he'd drive the dog into the cardboard box, right? And when he touched the cardboard box, we'd pay the dog, and then we kept making the box smaller and smaller until I had a dog that used to nudge a nickel, you know, on the ground. But we started with this big box, right?
Sure.
So like you said, Bryan, that you can't rush things. You can't move too fast because there's a process to training, especially with certain things that you can't skip steps, because you'll end up backtracking because you went too fast.
Oh, yeah. You're going to have to fix problems. It's like a really good football coach will say when he's talking about maybe somebody he coached in high school, and now this guy is in the NFL. And he think we taught the basics. We taught the basics. We didn't move on until he had all the basics, and then you move on. It's the same thing with dog training. You can't rush it because, like you say, you'll be coming back to it at some point. And
right.
when it happens, it's going to be on a film set. And you're really in trouble, especially nowadays, because if you say no too loud, there's people on a film set that will want to sue you and put you in jail. So,
Hey,
I had a remark that I saw on Facebook, because when my dad passed away, I did an interview with the New York Times.
By the way.
Oh, thank you. And I did this thing for the New York Times, and there was something about, all the dogs that we bred along over the years to get the perfect Lassie look. And of course, we had to do that typically times 3, because we have a stunt double and we have a lighting double. So in the article, it said, I put it up on my public page on Facebook, and it said, that over the years, my dad was involved in training 1,000 different collies, or bred around 1,000. It's probably exaggerated somewhat, but somebody made a remark that, oh, that sounds so cruel to have bred 1,000 dogs, right? But keep in mind, we had 10 generations of Lassie. We typically had to breed 3 or 4 litters just to get one dog, right? And all the dogs that we didn't keep, we gave them away, most of them, or they were part of some kind of charitable giveaway involved with the dog food or the TV series. So, these dogs all found great homes. We used to send them out with a contract that said, if you can't keep this dog, bring him back to us. And I know that Bryan and myself and my family and his family, there was some mention about, how rough trainers used to be back in the old days. And there were some rough trainers. But I always respected the people who treated their animals right, because whoever's taking the best care of the equipment is going to get the longest use out of it. And I always felt like protecting the dog was job one. But you still have to, the dog has to hit all the marks, perform everything the director wants, or you're going to get fired.
Well, yeah, and you don't have to be mean. You don't have to be rough. Dogs are smart. I mean, they can figure things out. You just have to teach them. That's all. I always use this example, but I mean, if you put a big table full of computer parts and you told me to put it together, and if I didn't, you're going to smack me in the head with a zap or something, Well, I'm still not going to be able to do it. You're going to be hitting me all day long because I don't know how to do it. But if you actually taught me how to do it, I would do it, and then you give me a bag of M&Ms for a reward. I'd be happy, So it's not, you just take your time and teach. I wish we had more real teachers in our schools like that, who just go, wait a minute, I can teach you.
Well, they're pressed for time. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But one thing I want to say, so we know, Bryan, if Robert and I ever have you work with us, we just give you some M&Ms. So thanks for
M&M peanuts. I don't like regular M&Ms.
Okay, thanks for telling us. So we'll start working on that.
Yeah, I'll just take more of my diabetes medicine. That's all.
Okay, but let me ask this, and I've never asked this to Robert. Robert and I, of course, have talked about this sort of stuff because it's cool. We for me, this is great. But what would you consider? Bryan? What would you consider like pinnacle? We're talking dogs. If we started talking lions and tigers stuff, we get going crazy because I love that too. But if dog, what do you think's the best dog work you've seen in a movie?
Well, it's hard to say in a way, because you can have a fantastic dog and you can do fantastic stuff, and if you have a crap director, it's not going to show. If you can take a dog that doesn't do all these other things, but if a director shoots it really well, it's going to be great. Here's a real good example of a well-trained dog and a director that did really well, and that was Turner and Hooch. The way they shot that dog was really for the dog. A lot of times now they'll shoot things and it's not for the dog. The dog has to do some things and stuff, but it's not for the dog, When you shoot something for the dog and you really spend the time at it, it makes a lot of difference. So that's a hard question to ask, because there's been so many. I mean, I've done a lot of things, and I know Robert has too, where you go, wow, that was really good. I did that. I'm really impressed by what I just did there. And the director's like, all right, moving on, let's go. I couldn't care less. Have no idea what you just got them.
Well,
I think part of the thrill, I think, and Bryan's probably been here, where they come up with something over lunch that they decided the dog is going to do in the next scene. They give it to you. You have the training, but you have no idea how you're going to do the shot. There's all kinds of obstacles that you're seeing, and you're thinking, well, I could do that, but there's this big table here. You're trying to figure out how to make this work, how to align the circuits to get the dog to go to the place they're supposed to go, and obviously working everything from the end to the beginning. But then they'll change it on you. They'll change things. Like, I remember I was working on Top Dog, and they said, we want to do some sneezes and some yawns with Betty. And I said, okay, well, no, I'm sorry. It was a sneeze and a yawn. But I told them that I wanted to do the yawns first, right? Because the sneeze was a different mood, different motivation for doing it. It was a different tempo. So we did the yawns, we got all the yawns, and we did the sneezes. And then they said, can we do some more yawns? I'm like, oh my God. It's like the same thing if you were doing speak. That's one tempo. Yawn's a different tempo. I like to keep the tempos together. Let's do all the sad stuff now. Let's do the more high energy kind of stuff, separate. But directors will change gears on you, and they'll throw in stuff, and you have to figure out on the fly. And I'm sure, Bryan, you've been there and said, I don't know how I just did that shot, but damn it worked.
Yeah, and here, when you were talking about yawns, and I don't teach that, or very seldom do I teach that unless I have to, because you'll sit there with your dog and you're going, yawn, and you're trying to get them really bored so they'll yawn. Well, what happens is you're going, yawn, and you're getting tired. The dog's just sitting there. And here, Frank Inn would do this. Frank Inn and Joe Camp had been together since the beginning of Binging. So when I'm working on this show, the director, Joe Camp, would be talking about something, and Frank and Juanita were there, we're all listening to it, and so he'd do something. Okay, so I'll start to routine him that way, and then Joe Camp would go, oh, wait a minute, no, let's do it this way. Oh, boy. Frank would go, I told you, you cannot change things when I routine my dog, And it would be this forth thing like these lovers would do, because they've been together forever. But I would just sit there and laugh. I mean,
Well, for one thing, I don't know if you've seen this movie, Bryan, but Robert and I both think this is really great, because I think it's the movie with the most dogs ever in one scene, for example, and that's White God. And Teresa Miller worked on it, but she wasn't responsible for that.
She was more of a coordinator than the actual trainer on the show. Yeah.
uh-huh.
I don't know. Have you seen? It was shot in Hungary, right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, White God is very similar. When I see White God, it's kind of like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where the dogs rise up against all the abuse that humans inflict upon them. So when William was over there, he worked a lot of the stuff with the primary dog, even though Teresa took all the credit. And then they had this Hungarian trainer that worked with all these dogs. I've never seen 100 dogs running together without it being CGI, right? Yeah. I mean, like Pet Sematary 2, Cindy James had a bunch of cats that ran, but there were only like 5 cats and the rest were computer generated, right? This was all dogs. Yeah. And they all were running and snarling and dragging things, pulling things, ripping up things, and the dogs never got in a fight. They're all pumped up. Yeah. Bryan can tell you, I'm sure he's done jobs where you had, obviously we've done dog attacks, but where you have a group of dogs that are all running to the same place for the same reward. And, along the way, they're like, hey, stay away from me. And, they're all jockeying for position. And by the time they get to you, they're so lathered up, you literally have to keep them apart from each other because they're just like pumped up to the max.
Well, that's anytime there's one other dog and then another dog and another, you're multiplying problems every time you add a dog. I second unit directed this thing, and part of the gag on this whole movie is 30 dogs running from point A to point B throughout this movie. And they end up, I don't know, at this church or something. So I hired a local person who had daycare and did training. And I said, okay, I need 30 dogs who get along. Well, all these dogs have been together for months and months. They run around and all that stuff. And I said, just what you do, take a whistle, blow your whistle. And when they get there, give everybody a reward. And it worked fine. But I wouldn't want to do, like I say, anytime you start, like when you guys came up to do that Mouth of Madness, so you came up with three dogs, and they originally wanted 10. Carpenter wanted 10 dogs to all run and come out, stop, run, and then start doing attacks everywhere. Well, Carpenter was smart enough to, I want to see these dogs before they work. So he brought them out to set the night before they had to work. Well, all 10 dogs ran off. took them all night to find all these Dobermans, right? Because this person just went out and got Dobermans from everybody. So the stunt coordinator called me because I was trying to get on the show to do stunts, and he called me, and so I called. I think I called Alvin. And who was it? It was you and another gentleman.
Angelo Rivers. Rivers. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys were really cool. You came up with the dogs. We got the shot with 3 dogs coming around, and I got to do a dog attack. So everything worked out fine. But there's times when you start adding more dogs, then you can get into trouble if you don't spend the time to work them. Because you got to weed out the dogs that want to fight the other dogs. You know, and
yeah, the dogs need to be familiar with each other. I know that, back in the old days, they used to do the muzzled dog fights. We did one in Eyes of an Angel that Alvin did that was highly controversial, even though the dogs were not hurt. It just looked bad. So when we did like Homeward Bound, we did play fighting, and then we just threw in all the snarling and everything. As a trainer, when I see a play fight, I know the difference between a play fight and 2 dogs that really want to fight, right? Only because I've had to separate dog fights along the line. But I think it's a really good sell if you can get 2 dogs that are so comfortable together that can really just look like they hate each other. I mean, there's so many nuances about training, and a lot of it is finding the right dogs to do it. The right pair of dogs to work together.
You can't just throw dogs in there together, and because you'll get a fight, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on Lassie, my grandfather was really good at getting Lassie to work with other animals, whether it was like a raccoon or a possum or whatever. And we'd normally bring in somebody like a Modesesso to bring in these animals, and then we'd kind of just work with them. But my grandfather always thought way ahead of time, because the dog that he used for all those animal scenes was Meyer. But when he went to a dog that lived more with the family, that's when he decided to go to Hey Hey, who was more of an athletic dog. Sometimes it's certain dogs are great for certain roles. It's like certain actors are great for certain roles. So a lot of it is finding the right dog for the right role. And of course, Bryan knows that the foundation of all of that is a solid training foundation.
Yeah, and that's true. I remember you reminded me something. I had an episode on this Here's Boomer thing, and he was a little bit bigger than Benji, but the same type of look, just a mutt. And the dog Boomer had to go into a barn, take and grab the reins of a horse and pull them out. Well, he had never been around horses before, so I was like, I was showing him that. Well, the dog was so smart that when he pulled on the reins and the horse moved, he was like, "Oh, look what I can do!" I mean, he was stoked. He'd walk out with his chest up, pulling on this horse, and this big, huge horse is following him. He was in his heaven, man.
One of the things I want to tie in here is that, a lot of people, because now it started in the 90s, this pet dog training, and there's all these people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year being pet dog trainers for the suburban people and stuff, and they don't have the skill level. I mean, we're talking high skill training here. That's what Robert and I have tried to bring to people on the internet, is let them know about high skill trainers. But one of the things I want to try to get across to everybody is that what we're talking about is not just movie work, that this sort of it's particulars, the snarling and that sort of stuff, but this ability, the way that we're talking about foundational stuff and basics and taking it slow and how you motivate a dog, I think that this applies to pet dog, normal pet dog, companion dog, whatever you want to call it, companion dog owners, more than what people are doing. And that's what I would like to see, more of like movie dog obedience being taught to the pet dog owners. What do you think, Bryan? Do you agree with that?
Well, I have like you guys, we've all walked our dogs. We've all been around people with dogs, and I'm probably being a little conservative when I say that there's 30% of people who own dogs should not own the dogs. They don't teach them. They let them run around. They don't pick up after their dog. Like people say, well, hey, there's a really cool dog park down the way. No, I'm not going to. Well, there's a lot of people, because there's a lot of people who don't know that their dog is sick. And I mean, it could be kennel cough. It could be coccidiosis. I don't know. But they take their dog to the dog park and it's drinking out of the water. Then your dog drinks out of the water.
Now, I feel kind of like education is what I provide as a private trainer now, because, you know, you can give a person a trained dog, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to maintain the training, you know, a month, a year down the road. They're going to do all the things that reinforce the wrong behavior. So what I like to teach my clients is I like to teach them training, but not just the training, but the maintenance of the training. Because you're going to need it for more than just one shot in a movie. You're going to need it for your whole lifetime. Yeah. And that's what I teach, owners to do, is to be able to maintain the training, watch what I'm doing, teach them in a way that they can understand, not use a whole bunch of technical terms that confuse them. I just try to put it in simple terms. Like, for example, in my book, one of my favorite quotes is, reward the effort, not the skill. So people say, well, you're using food in the early stages of your training. I'm like, yeah, but the idea is to get away from it. I'm rewarding the effort because they don't know it yet. But when they know it, that's the skill. They don't need to be paid anymore, because now it's something they've learned to enjoy, because all along the training process, you've been paying them for doing it right. So they don't even see what wrong is, because there's no payoff for doing it wrong. Wouldn't you agree, Bryan?
Yeah, here's, I've done some of the personal training too, and I really don't do it much because of the fact that a lot of people don't keep up on it and don't maintain it. But I don't know, there's been a few times that I've had a dog that wanted to do everything. I saw you do a mailbox on this thing. Can you teach my dog to do it? Yeah, I can do that. But here's the deal. If you don't maintain it, it's going to go to crap. A lot of people, here's an example. All kinds of reward, whether it's a biscuit, whether it's a rag, whether it's a ball, whether it's a good boy. Those are all rewards. I was doing a scene where my dog gets killed by the next door neighbor, and the kids who had the dog is lying down on his side and he's got a blanket over. The kids pull the blanket down and do their emotional thing, and then put the blanket back over the dog. And when they would say cut, I would always allow 3 or 4 seconds, and I would tell everybody to be quiet, because I do not want my dog to hear cut and get up, So I would always make him wait. And then what I did was I'd just sick him up on a blanket. He loved it. And a crew guy came up to me one time and says, your dog's doing really well. How come you don't reward him for that? And I said, did you just see that dog playing with the blanket? That was, to him, that meant more than a bite of food or anything else. That was fun for him. That was a great reward. So even my dog now, I've been, he's 1.5 years, and I started him at 6 weeks. And when, I'll have him, he has to, whenever we play outside, whatever toy it is, he has to bring it into the porch and then put it in his box, and every time he does it, give him a bite of food for it. So what? It's not a big deal, but I could do it without it. Yes. But I keep doing it, because why not reward him, if you can do it?
It accelerates the training for sure, especially in the early stages when you're meeting a dog for the first time.
Yeah. Well, I consider here's my thing. I do everything, and because I'm all about the results. I want the results. How do we get there? I don't care. I want the results. And it's just like, hey, people, if they're working, you want to get paid, right? And how many people are going to do volunteer work? Only people who do volunteer work are people who already have money and who don't need stuff. So why? And I hate this when people say, "Oh, you use tools or you use this." Yeah, smarter primates are the ones who use tools. Look at the primatology test. And it's like, hey, let's see you build a house. Oh, you use tools. You're not a real builder. You know what I mean? Or hey, that guy performed surgery on you, used a scalpel. He's not a real surgeon. It's like these idiots.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Well, it's a bunch of idiots, and I don't like. They're detractors, and there's a lot of them in the dog thing. It's like, oh, well, I could do that. Then a lot of people tell me I could train a quarter-mile recall. No, you can't, because you can't do it. Oh, it's just not useful. If you don't have a recall, you don't have a dog.
Well, you forget about the other part is you have to get a quarter mile away from your dog before you can even call him. And then once you call them, they're anticipating being called again, so the stay becomes more difficult. So, yeah, there's a lot of more things to it than just getting a dog to come. It's all the things that you did in preparing for that to happen.
Yeah, and I like we were talking about the reward thing. Anytime I can reward my dog for something, I will, because in a situation where you can't, it's going to work fine. Yeah. But dogs are smart. And it's like, okay, I haven't been getting a reward for that for quite a while. So, you know what?
Strike.
I really feel like doing it right now. All right, get over here and do it. Okay, here's a bite of food.
But then, that food can be used, too, to get a dog more amped up, like the toy.
I got a story for you. You might enjoy this. I was working as a stuntman on a film, and there was a lady with a dog, a trained dog that was, I don't know what it was. And I watched it for a second. I didn't know this person. And the dog has to do something, and then it comes over, and it finishes over by where the lady is, the trainer, and gives a reward. And then so back to ones, we're going to do it again. And the lady just grabs the collar and forces it over to where it was. And I said, well, why don't you just tell him to get over there and teach it. Just tell him to go over there instead of, my dog has to learn a lot of things, and I don't want to cloud his memory with something. And I'm going, okay.
Well, as soon as she touched the dog, now the dog has doubts about what he can do, right? So that was
smart. They can learn a bunch of things, man.
Yeah, well, my dad was always mentioned that too. It's like whenever we were on a set, we always used the back up, or we'd lead them into position. We didn't shove them into position, because if the dog has to look happy and you just shoved them into place, their ears are going to come down, everything's going to change. So we have to be really aware of not handling dogs like you would handle like a chicken, right?
Yeah, but and why not? What is the problem with being nice to your dog?
Right.
What is the problem with that? I never understood that. So when this lady said that to me, I just said, okay, have a nice day, walked away, and fell down someplace and went home.
That's I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of things that people want to bring up. Well, that's not dog training. Oh, you're using food, whatever. I don't care. I can do it. You can't do it. You know what I mean? That's what it comes down to. Can you do it? If you can't do it and you don't have it on film, then sit down and shut up, Junior. Because
Right.
I mean, seriously, Robert. Because Robert and I have to deal with this stuff. I mean, Robert he really works with the pet dog owners. I try to spend more time with people who are dog trainers already, but they want to become better. I mean, lift their levels up and their skill level up, and also because I've done so many things. I mean, Bryan, you've been around for since before the Beatles, but but I mean, Robert and I.
I think my first film was Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, Casablanca.
Yeah. He was working. Actually, I think the original Call of the Wild, right?
Well, when I started, they were still doing this with the camera.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, we have a lot of experience. You guys have a lot of experience. I have a lot of experience, and so there are some people who really want to lift their levels up, and maybe you run into them too, Bryan. I mean. But this is something that I try to concentrate on is the people. And there's, it's not the majority, but the people want to become better dog trainers. And how do you do that? Like you guys were talking about, how do you do that? And then have curiosity. Now, we all had curiosity, or we wouldn't know what we know. And we didn't sit around saying, well, tell me, We went out. We had to pursue it. We had to pay our dues. Everybody, Robert paid his dues since he was a little kid. I mean, everything he talks about, everything he had to do. His dad made him do stuff, but his apprenticeship. He did his apprenticeship, or he might call it, his slavery. He might have called it slavery. Right?
I might have preferred it at some point. I did use that word.
but Bryan, you paid your dues, and you listened and learned, and you tried to get better, obviously, or you wouldn't be who you are now.
Yeah, I tell people this all the time, especially in the class that I teach, is imagination is your only limitation. If a dog can physically do it, then think of how to train it. It's like when I started teaching the mailbox thing a long time ago, where they put the mail in and push it up in the nose and nose the little flag up. I had no idea how to do that. I didn't even know if you could do it. But I went, well, okay, here, let's, first of all, we got to have a retrieve. Okay, so I teach a retrieve, and then he's got to open it with his foot. Okay, so I'll teach that. And pretty soon you're like, wow, I got the whole routine. So if you can imagine something that the dog can physically do, then you can train it to a certain degree. But don't limit yourself with thinking that you won't be able to do it, or don't be worried about thinking out of the box.
Yeah, there's a recipe. You have to trust the recipe, because when you're doing something like that has multiple behaviors mixed into one gag, you're having to teach everything individually and then put it all together.
Right. I love doing that. I was one of those people that I would do that on Boomer as much as I could. Here's another example. I had to have a dog who's trying to make friends with this older lady, and she's in bed, and she's kind of a roundish big lady, and the dog goes out and gets a dead crow. Now, we don't know whether he killed it or not. He just picks up a dead crow. So what the dog wants to do is make friends, and he wants to give the dog the crow to this old lady, right? So the dog comes down the hall, comes into the bedroom, and puts the crow up on the tummy, and then comes around to the other side of the bed, gets up on the bed, and pulls the cover over himself. Okay. So the right away the director goes, okay, so we'll put a camera here, get the dog coming in, and we'll put a camera over here and have the dog put the thing up, and then we'll put a camera over here and have the dog. And I said, whoa, just put the camera in the corner. I'll have the dog do the whole thing. Just get it from here. And it worked. It was beautiful. And the only thing they did is they just did a little tight shot of the dog putting the crow in. But I saved them so much time. Because you know as well as I do how long it takes. Every time you change that camera, you have to relight. You have to switch things. You have to do things. And in the film business, time really is money. That's a lot of money when you got a crew standing around. So I would do things like that. I love to routine things. To me, that was kind of my passion. I hated to go on. I hated that kind of stuff. But if something had to do something and put something in something and then come over here and do this and do that, that was my forte. I love to do that.
Well, this is, I think, like I thought, we got so much stuff to talk about. We didn't even cover some of the things I want to cover. So we're going to have to do this again. But,
again?
I know, but Robert and I both will have some M&Ms for you, Bryan. So we will reward your effort. So because there's a lot of things I wanted to ask you, I didn't get to ask you, and these stories are, this is really going to be an archive, history, because here's a sad fact. It's the end of an era, guys.
It really is.
It's the end of an era, and you guys, and Bryan, stuff. Because you had contact with people I didn't have contact with. I know about the things. Robert had contact with some of these people too. He knew Frank N and stuff, but you were working with Frank N, and there's all this stuff. This is history. and they're the one or two people out of a million that care about this stuff. This is going to be, we got some documentation of it at least. So that's one thing, and I think it's important to not just talking about the dog training stuff, but to have the documentation of this film history, really. And there's a lot of things I wanted to talk to you about. I've done a lot of fight choreography and stuff. I got the shit beat out of me. That's what I ought to say. Is I've had people standing on my head in a bathroom.
Hey, me too.
And I had the director. Oh, that was good. You want to do that again? No, hell no. I don't want to do that again. No, I don't want to do that again. But anyway, so that's for another time. But anyway, I just want to say, everybody, this you're gonna play back a lot of stuff here. We're gonna have to do another one. I mean, it's but it's non-union. It's non-union, Brian. You're not getting your SAG news. Neither are you, Robert. So no residuals from this.
I haven't worked on this. Hey, I got one more story to tell you.
Okay.
We're talking about if you got another one in you. I was stunt coordinating on this Beethoven movie, and this was they had the dogs I had nothing to do with, but private party dogs that the trainers, whoever they were, got the dogs, had a month or two to train them, and all. So I'm doubling a guy who I have to go down 28 flights of stairs all at once. I'm going, okay. So what we did is we did the bottom part first, and then we do the top part. So the top part I go backwards, and when I hit a middle landing, I flip over and then go frontwards. So I'm standing. So the director I'm standing there, and I'm getting ready to go backwards, so I can't see what's going on because the camera's way down at and I've got an AD telling me when to go. I went when he told me when to go. Well, Beethoven I'm going fast down the stairs, and Beethoven is going dun, 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 dun. So I beat him down the stairs, right? So I'm going, okay, no. And so the director's like, hey, Brian, you got another one in you? And I'm like, yeah. So I'm watching this now. I watch him rehearse the dog again, and the dog's going 2 miles an hour. This is a long way to fall down 28 stairs. So I'm sitting there watching this, and action, and they're calling the dog down, and the AD is going, go, and I'm like, no, go, and then I went. And the dog finally beat me down the stairs. But if I'd have gone at that same time again, I'd have been knocked out by going down the stairs.
But sometimes you have to selectively not listen to what they're telling you to do, especially when you know the dog better than they do.
Yeah, they don't know everything. They didn't know this, but I've trained dogs before, and I could tell this dog was not going to go fast down these stairs. I don't care if you put a stake down there.
Chris didn't have a high speed. He just had medium and low.
Pretty much like me nowadays, slow to stop.
All right. Well, anyway, people, stay tuned, subscribe, like all this, and we'll do this again. And of course, Robert and I are always talking about different things. We got stuff that'll be coming out soon. And anyway, but Brian, thanks for doing this. I want to say it where everybody hears it, so otherwise they'll say, "Oh, you never even thanked the guy." Well, yeah,
thank you, because it's a pleasure to see you again after, I don't know, 20, 30 years, whatever.
I loved your book. It was great. And
the book. Yeah, we got to
tell them about your book, Brian.
Yeah.
Tell them about your book.
Oh, well, it's basically my life story from being young to being old like me now. And it takes through, we go through Vietnam, we go through when I was in a gang, we go through when I was in jail. When I got into the service, there was quite a few stories on the Vietnam thing. And then there's a lot of stories on working dogs and cats and chimps and orangs and all that stuff. And I got to talk about a lot of the people that I got to work with, and also doing stunts. So they're all stories of my life.
That's the beautiful, you have such an interesting life. I mean, motion picture trainers in general have lives that people can't even imagine sometimes.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I got to do a lot of things, and I made it out pretty decently. So
Well done. I liked it.
Okay, so people, that book you can get it on Amazon. And just remember, look for Bryan Renfro. Bryan Renfro. And also look for him to come back on here because we'll make him do it. Yeah, we'll force him. We're going to use compulsion. We'll get a spike collar. We'll get him in. Well, anyway. So, yeah.